This is not about Trump. It's not about Trump. The isolation, the degradation of America was going to happen anyway. It had to happen. This is just the necessary course of the logic of Western predatory capitalism. Just like Gorbachev wasn't really the one who destroyed the Soviet Union, he just oversaw the inevitable destruction, self-destruction of the Soviet Union because it had run its course. America has run its course. And when I say Western predatory capitalism, those adjectives are important because it's not even really about capitalism in and of itself. It really mostly has to do with the culture and the civilizational peculiarities of the West. They don't act like that because of capitalism. Their capitalism acts like this because of the way they are. You understand?
The American dream, built on strength and opportunity, now faces a crisis. While Trump promised economic revival and national pride, the reality may differ. The gap between the wealthy and working class is widening, and those in power aren't rebuilding America. They're looting it. Trump, a master salesman, has repackaged economic decline as a victory. Instead of admitting America is losing its global dominance, he spins its downfall as a comeback. From inflated economic power to failing energy policies, the cracks are showing. Trump's drill baby drill mantra oversimplifies the reality of global markets. US oil needs high prices to stay competitive, but OPEC, with its lower costs, can flood the market and push prices down, crippling American producers. During his last term, Saudi Arabia and Russia did exactly that, exposing his lack of control. America's economic decline isn't accidental, it's engineered. The ultra-rich have abandoned national interests for global profits, leaving ordinary Americans to bear the cost. The real question is whether Trump is saving America or selling its collapse. Let's watch this video clip for more insight. Remember to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on your notification bell. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the video.
Anyone who says, for example, well, that's what you get for voting for Trump, or you should have voted for Harris. Well, I mean, you're so thoroughly indoctrinated and participating in the deception and the deflection of that system that you yourself are just as much a cause for the collapse of the United States as anyone else that you blame for it. You created a class of national elites, oligarchical elites, whose private profit interests are no longer connected to your own economy. You did that. They're not connected to any productive activity. They're not connected to any nationality. They're not connected to your standard of living. The military-industrial complex, defense contractors, have misplaced enough money to house every homeless person in America and educate every child. They charge so much for one weapon that China could probably build a dozen for the same price. I mean, if the military-industrial complex has been the vehicle that carried the American economy, well, it sure isn't a fuel-efficient vehicle. It's a gas guzzler. And of course, you can barely get anyone anymore in America, young people, what have you, who are willing to put on a uniform and fight for this money laundering scam. That's all it is. That's all it is at this point. I mean, you want to send your sons and your daughters to go die in a foreign country for Raytheon? That's what they're doing. They're not fighting for democracy. They're fighting for General Dynamics. Well, nobody wants to do that. How are you going to convince anyone that they're fighting for democracy 6,000 miles away from their own crumbling neighborhood in New York, and their neighborhood is crumbling because all of their tax money is going to Lockheed Martin? You can't convince people to fight for that. You can't. So then, because your pool of soldiers is shrinking, then you have to start changing your approach to killing and carnage. You have to start changing your means of destruction, because you can't really do traditional warfare anymore. You had to develop new technologies, which means that the demand for conventional weapon systems, which the military-industrial complex was based upon, that's given way to focus on drones and cyber capabilities and artificial intelligence and so on and so on and so on. The MIC hasn't disappeared, but its form and its scale has changed. And part of that, too, is because America started moving manufacturing overseas, globalization and so on. But pretty soon, more and more companies were keeping their toothbrushes and their shampoo in somebody else's house. And you know what that means. America went from being the wife of corporations to being the side chick. See, again, because you had to change how you go about killing people, rather than learning how to get along with people, you had to come up with new technology, and that new technology depends upon electronics, which means rare earths. Well, we're talking about private corporations, talking about profit-driven corporations, so all they care about is money. All they care about is low-cost acquisition, and China flooded the market with cheap rare earths, which caused the market price to plummet, and that put rare earths mines out of business. You see how that works? Just like I was talking about with oil. So now China controls about 80% of the world's rare earths market and 90% of the processing. Think about that. The American military is completely dependent upon Chinese rare earths. You know, you talk about confronting China, but they can shut you down in 3 seconds if they want to. This is what I mean. You literally created this situation for yourselves.
America built an empire by exploiting other nations, but now its people are the target. The elites, once focused on global control, now see Americans as just another resource to exploit. For decades, the military-industrial complex fueled the economy and justified endless wars. But with the Cold War over and public support for war collapsing, its grip is slipping. Iraq, Afghanistan, and Ukraine, trillions wasted, lives lost, and only defense contractors profiting. Young Americans no longer want to fight for corporate interests while their country crumbles. The system is breaking, and the real power players have already moved on. The collapse isn't coming, it's here. Meanwhile, the nature of war has changed. Traditional armies are out, and AI, cyber warfare, and drones are in. But there's a catch. America outsourced manufacturing, and China took over. With China controlling 80% of rare earth materials and 90% of processing, the US military is at its mercy. Without China, even America's war machine would fall apart. Let's watch more clips from the video.
So yes, this is the faction that Trump represents. And you'll see that all of his policies serve that faction. I've said this before. You have to look past all of the MAGA rhetoric, all of the nationalist rhetoric, because all of that is all just a camouflage for what will be the shrinkage of America on the global stage and what will be the ransacking of the US economy. It's like if a snake oil salesman was selling cyanide instead of snake oil. That's what Trump is doing. Like, for example, okay, I've already talked about how his energy policy, how that puts the US on a path to energy bankruptcy, not self-sufficiency. And it will only strengthen OPEC, by the way. But also look at withdrawing from the WHO. Okay, American pharmaceutical companies and healthcare providers, insurance companies, and so on, they're expressing concern and disapproval for what he did, for pulling out of the WHO. But who benefits from that? The beneficiaries are going to be all of the so-called emerging economies, emerging markets, and their healthcare providers, their pharmaceutical companies, their insurers, and so forth. They're hindered right now by patent protections, by regulatory restrictions, and policies against, especially against generic drug production and so on. India and China, for example. This is very important for them. So this is actually the sidelining of America. And of course, the same is true, of course, obviously, with tariffs. You know, basically everything that Trump proposes or promises or wants to do, all of it amounts to shutting America off from the world and directing everybody elsewhere, you know, telling all business to go elsewhere. The only place he approaches with open hostility, you know, from a policy point of view, the only place he approaches with any hostility is Europe and other Western countries, other allies. I mean, he might be serious about trying to take control of the Panama Canal. He might be serious about that. But I think that mostly has to do with just confirming that America is only going to be interested in having influence in the Western Hemisphere, in the global North. Even that, when you weigh the costs of maintenance of the Panama Canal, management, staff, security, and so forth, repairs, and on and on, everything that America would have to spend in order to control the Panama Canal, well, the net profit is barely going to be $1 billion annually. That's assuming that the trade flows through the Panama Canal remain as they are, which, given Trump's obsession with tariffs and his obsession with alienating global business from doing business with America, it seems likely that trade through the Panama Canal will actually decrease. So frankly, taking control of the Panama Canal will most likely end up costing America considerably more than they'll ever profit from it. It's the same with Greenland, really. Denmark, to sell them Greenland, you know, plus the amount of investment that they would have to put in, the initial cost and the investment and taking over services and so on inside of Greenland. Even with Greenland's natural resources, the U.S., I think, would be lucky to break even. I mean, that's if we take it seriously in the first place. Like I said, nothing Trump says should ever be taken at face value. He never means anything that he says. His public positions are always either bargaining tactics or just sheer misdirections. Both Panama and Greenland, and the idea of Canada becoming an American state. This isn't unique to Trump. You know, because you always have people saying that, like, even analysts, well, that policy didn't work out as planned. Wow, that really backfired, and so on. Because the outcome was not the outcome that was outlined by the original rhetoric. No, the outcome was exactly as desired.
America's power structure has changed. The military-industrial complex, once the backbone of global dominance, has been sidelined by an even greater force, big tech and high finance. Apple, Google, and Amazon are no longer just businesses. They manipulate information, shape politics, and influence governments with a reach that old-school military empires never could. These corporations aren't loyal to a nation, only to profit. Then there's Wall Street. After 2008, the financial sector didn't collapse. It became invincible. Giants like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street now control trillions in assets far beyond national borders. They don't serve America or any country. They serve capital. Compared to them, the military-industrial complex looks like a minor player. This is what Trump truly represents. Not nationalism, not a fight for American greatness, but the engineered shrinking of America as a global power. His policies don't strengthen the country. They isolate it, weaken its global influence, and make it easier for corporate elites to extract wealth before moving on. When he pulled the US from the WHO, it wasn't about sovereignty, but about shifting power to China and India in the pharmaceutical sector. Every move has a deeper agenda. America is no longer the world's leader. It's just another market, a resource to be exploited. The real question is, what happens when there's nothing left to take? The illusion of strength is cracking. Traditional war is dead. Massive armies no longer march across battlefields. Warfare has evolved into cyber dominance, artificial intelligence, and economic leverage. But here's the catch. America outsourced its manufacturing. It wanted cheap labor and quick profits, so it handed production to China. Now, China controls 80% of rare earth materials and 90% of processing, essential components for everything from fighter jets to smartphones. If China wanted, it could cut off America's military overnight. So, is this all a mistake? No, it's a controlled shift. The rise of BRICS isn't just some organic rebellion against the West. It's a strategic realignment guided by the same financial elites who abandoned America. They aren't interested in preserving Western dominance. They only want to stay on top, no matter who wins. And here's the final gut punch. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans are being set up for economic recolonization. The same low-paying, back-breaking jobs once given to immigrants? Those are coming for you. The same wealth gap that strangled the global South? It's creeping into the US middle class. History isn't just repeating itself, it's flipping. The people who once colonized are about to experience colonization. And the elites? They'll be just fine. So, while they row away in their lifeboats, they tell you to stay put. They assure you everything's fine. But here's the truth. You're in the steerage of this sinking ship. And when they say make America great again, play it in reverse. Because what they really mean is, you're going down with the ship. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in our next video.